Bonjour et bienvenue pour cette seconde journée de notre colloque. Cette table ronde est consacrée au rôle des indicateurs dans les processus d'évaluation de différentes entités des systèmes d'enseignement supérieur et de recherche. Bien sûr, on sait que des indicateurs peuvent être utiles à la fois pour l'information sur les ressources dont disposent les évalués, c'est-à-dire les inputs, et sur les activités et productions, les outputs. Une question importante dans les deux cas, c'est que les indicateurs figurent dans des dossiers d'auto-évaluation ou dans de la documentation complémentaire, et la comparabilité entre entités, entre indicateurs utilisés, et donc la disponibilité de sources et de méthodes de calcul qui soient fiables et transparentes. Cette table ronde ne va pas aborder l'ensemble de ce très vaste sujet, mais se concentre sur les indicateurs relatifs aux productions des entités évaluées. Nos trois premières contributions présenteront des expériences étrangères, ainsi que des travaux académiques qui ont pu être faits sur ces expériences pour mesurer l'impact que l'utilisation des indicateurs peut avoir sur le processus et au-delà, donc sur l'évolution du système d'enseignement supérieur et de recherche. Ce qui apparaîtra, un certain nombre de choses, mais je voudrais souligner le fait que l'utilisation d'indicateurs dans les processus d'évaluation n'est bien sûr qu'une des caractéristiques de ces systèmes d'évaluation, et qu'il y a au moins deux autres choses qui sont extrêmement importantes sur ce qui nous intéresse, c'est le grain de l'évaluation et le grain d'utilisation des indicateurs d'une part, et puis le fait que l'utilisation des indicateurs peut être couplée ou pas avec un lien entre performance et évaluation. Et selon les systèmes, on a des combinaisons assez variées. Donc je vous présente très rapidement les contributions. Andrea Bonaccorsi s'appuiera notamment sur l'expérience de l'Anvour en Italie, à laquelle il a participé, et qui donne désormais lieu, du fait de la richesse des données qui sont disponibles, à des analyses empiriques par des chercheurs. Peter van den Besselaar présentera le cas des Pays-Bas, mais aussi de l'Australie, déjà mentionné hier par Thierry Coulon pour l'ancienneté de cette pratique d'évaluation, et Australie, qui a donné lieu aussi à des publications scientifiques et à certaines controverses sur justement l'impact de l'utilisation des indicateurs. Sousmart abordera l'expérience du Royaume-Uni et la réflexion approfondie qui y est menée sur l'utilisation de différents indicateurs. Enfin, Sophie Cluet présentera le point de vue d'une université française et abordera un peu plus largement à la fois les utilisations internes et les utilisations externes d'indicateurs. Donc, à la suite de ces présentations, on aura un effet table ronde avec des échanges entre les contributeurs, puis on ouvrira l'échange à la salle. Une précision, nos trois premiers contributeurs s'exprimeront en anglais, mais les questions pourront être posées en français puisque Andrea et Peter comprennent le français et que Sue bénéficie d'une interprétation simultanée. Ce que je suggère néanmoins, même si la partie échange est prévue à la fin de notre session, s'il y a des questions de compréhension à la suite de chacune des présentations, levez le doigt et on prendra la question de compréhension et on la traitera au mieux. Voilà. Andrea.
Alors, merci de votre invitation. And apologies for talking in English. I will report about the Italian experience in the assessment of research and the use of quantitative indicators and other kind of assessment methods, their benefits and their caveats and criticism. So I will go through the illustration of the most important aspects of the Italian experience. I will show some positive impact, some criticism, and some recent academic research that has done effort to evaluate the evaluation and to measure the positive and negative impact of it. The main experience in the Italian context has been called VQR, valutazione della qualità della ricerca, assessment of research quality. It has been established when the agency was put in place in 2011, and immediately the goal was to cover the period that was not covered before, from 2004 to 2010. There has been a previous experiment with no impact on funding of universities in 2001-2003. So the first evaluation has been over a long period. The second one has been 2011-2014, so 4 years. And the next one is expected to start end of this year to cover another 5-year period. What was the use of indicators at that time? First, it is important to understand the mechanism. All researchers are evaluated. All people employed in universities and national research, public research organizations submit 3 products, three, which means publications or other products, software, design, maps, other. In the previous one, 2 products in the second one, which was shorter. And then panels of experts, more than 400 people, evaluate them with this distinction. Hard sciences, STEM disciplines, tend to use bibliometric indicators to evaluate products. Social sciences and humanities tend to use peer review. Overall, the system is 50-50 by law. The law says that at least 50% has to be done in peer review. Even in bibliometric indicators, you can have both bibliometric and peer review, but overall, it's dominant in STEM. What kind of indicators are used? A combination between citations normalized, that is received by the publication in the subject category of the journal in the same period, by quantile in the word distribution, and normalized indicators of the journal factor. In peer review, it's a qualitative assessment for which more than 14,000 people have been mobilized, 1/3 of each foreign, not Italian, to evaluate books or articles in fields in which bibliometric indicators are not available or not reliable. Then you have a final score. Each researcher receives his own individual score, but this is only privately communicated and is secret. It's never disclosed to anybody else. The agency has never disclosed any individual indicator whatsoever. But then they are aggregated to units that have statistical properties, which means departments with their disciplines, or homogeneous disciplinary areas, or universities. Of course, the more you aggregate, the more freedom you have in the criteria for aggregation, as we will see in a moment. Same indicators plus H-index have been used in the National Scientific Habilitation for Academic Career as a threshold measure. The career is evaluated by panels that have a qualitative appreciation of the full aspects of the career of researchers, but a threshold is used to select initially based on the same indicators. Now, what is the impact? First, in hard sciences, it has promoted an internationalization of the publication, that is, international journals as the normal way to do, which was always in the practice, but has been magnified. So this means that popular books or national language journals in science have been, of course, less important. does this practice create an unbalance or a bias against humanities or fields in which books are important, and books, you know, are items for which we don't have bibliometrics? Well, we did some research, and what happens is that books are evaluated better than articles on average in humanities fields in which a book is a seriously epistemically rooted kind of publication, which takes a long period of preparation, large size and ambition, while in fields in which books were not and are not so important because communities, international communities mostly use journals, then books were penalized. So in a sense, humanities and social sciences got a message about the mix of their ways of communicating scientific results. Another major initiative that followed was the classification of journals, you know, a very controversial issue, and we know a lot about your national experience on this. The starting point was a clear need to do something because the initial collection of data on where do people publish was made on a completely bottom-up, non-regulated system in which all researchers could indicate whatever kind of publication they were writing on, including, citizen newspapers or city news. So there was a first classification which defined out of 60,000, 24 roughly 1,000 scientific journals, and then around 3,000 Class A journals, with a large system of peer review of experts. This system has created, as in France, a lot of controversies, as it's normal, and what was created was a system of discussion about this, which is based on the appeal, the possibility for editors of journals to appeal against a decision, to provide additional evidence, and to re-examine dynamically the set of Class A journals. In terms of publishers, on the contrary, there has been a lot of discussion about whether to classify publishers, and that has been negative. There is too much variability in the quality of series of books for publishers. That is doesn't make sense to rank publishers in any way. What is the impact of quantitative indicators on institutions? Well, the Italian system has been, since the beginning, one in which part of the funding has been linked to the aggregate performance of universities. This is not to imitate the English experience, but it's because there has been an experience before, in the early 2000s, in which the evaluation was done without any impact on funding of universities. And the experience was that, you know, was good to know, but the behavior of universities, of rectors, of, you know, the community, of the academic community, was not so responsive with respect to the evaluation. Now, with an impact on funding, which is, let's say, marginal, that is what is called premialità, it's a share, a small share of the total funding. Well, what is seen is that the behavior of universities and also public research organizations changes, in the sense that they take much more care about their information systems, about their research performance. They try to discuss internally. And there has been also an interesting change in the institutional design, because in the first evaluation, the money was channeled directly to universities with no implication for their internal allocation of resources. And in the first period, what happened is what you would expect. You maybe the leaders of university, you get extra money and you distribute your money internally to the university almost in equal parts, or in, if you want, to everybody. So in the second period, it has been changed so that those departments that are responsible for the best performance receive directly the money. And typically what they do is to launch a development plan for the next 5 years, which is mostly based in recruitment, in new researchers, and in ambitious goals. So now we are in the middle of this experimentation, that is moving the extra money from the university only to department. An important point is that, however, in the Italian experience, this money has not really been additional. from the government side. It has been part of the existing budget, so the perception of universities was mixed. On one hand, we get something more because we are good, but on the other hand, we are not really getting more money on average on the total university national budget. This is called excellence departments in this period. Now, another interesting impact is as follows. Initially, the evaluation was mostly concentrated on research. The evaluation of quality of education is another branch that is done according to European standards, basically, of self-evaluation and quality assurance principle. What was left out was the outreach, the third mission, the many activities that universities do for the economy and for society. So in the second exercise, there was some pressure to say, okay, we do not only teach and do research, we also do a lot of other things for society. And then the notion of third mission has been created with a clear understanding that is not linked only to economic valorization. That is the traditional spin-off companies, patents that are typically important for science and technology, but covers also what we call the production of public goods. That is the activities by which universities or public research organizations give value to society in terms of education of adult population, creation of infrastructure for life sciences, manage the cultural heritage or museums or historical buildings, or do public engagement, outreach, popular science, public consultation, public controversies, and the like. So, and recently we had the opportunity to examine the relation between the two, because there is a large discussion about whether if you do too much third mission, you may sacrifice research, or if you do too many patents, you sacrifice publications, this kind of trade-off, which are very important in the overall mission of universities. And what we find very recently, and you find the references, is on the contrary, quite interesting result that they are positively related. So most researchers are at the same time good in their research publication record and also good in other third mission activities, which is not obvious for the international literature on this issue. Okay, but then we have the negative side, or the caveat. Well, people will always play the game. You give them an indicator and people react, maximize the return on the indicator by slightly changing their behavior. So for sure, when we say about citations or publications, you will see games like self-citation, like a click citation, group of people that cite each other as a gift, as an exchange. You will find more honorary authorship or gift ownership. That is, you put as an author someone who has not really contributed to the publication, okay? And you also see probably a larger number of co-authors, okay? Yes. The answer is yes, it happens, okay? It happens. We have been 3 studies recently in the Italian case that show that self-citations increase, actually. Does this mean that you have to eliminate indicators? I believe that we have to be clever enough to understand, and here social scientists are the people we need, understand the behavior of people in reaction to incentives, and try to establish a transparent game and some mitigation measures. For example, you can eliminate self-citations if you believe they are inflated. You can do social network analysis to examine click if you want to examine this issue. You do fractional counting if you want to take care about this. And of course, indicators can take an autonomous life, which means that once created, they're used by society in ways that forget the instruction manual. So you, the expert, or you, the agency, says, okay, be careful, use this way, don't use this way, but people will use, or the media, or the rectors. We have been fighting with several rectors that wanted to use the individual scores. And we said, don't do this, because individual scores don't have statistical properties, so you cannot use for this reason. But we know there is this tendency. Again, We know this. We have another couple of papers in which we use the reaction of media to this. By knowing that, you can design the evaluation in such a way that it improves over time dynamically to take care of this stuff. So yes, I just thought the last slide to show some more conceptual or theoretical understanding. I mean, sometimes the evaluation has been proposed as a sort of technocratic approach. That is, okay, we have something which is objectively measurable. There are experts that can measure. You cannot fight against the measure, right? You cannot fight against gravity or whatever. So, okay, please take it as it stands, okay? I'm not following this line of reasoning. I'm in favor of a realistic, which also is compatible with some only moderate kind of social constructivism, in which, okay, reality may be objective, but the measurement of reality is always a socio-cognitive process, in which you play the game with the object, and you need a social process of sharing the language by which you give evaluation, which always starts as more qualitative and general, and then take the place of numbers and measures. By doing this, we take the commitment to discuss all the time. That is to keep the debate open, to see and correct the system when it is needed. But at the same time, when you establish commonly agreed measures, then you apply, because you need comparability. You need fairness to universities, fairness to organizations, that you really follow something, then you consistently apply the indicators. So indicators are really a powerful support. They have a number of positive impact, changing the behavior and converging into international standards. The foundation should be open to discussion all the time. That's part of the evaluation mission. Use them for units for which the statistical properties and the distribution can be controlled, so not at the individual level. Be careful about the unintended effects and try to mitigate them. Of course, never leave the indicators speak alone, because they speak together with many other tools. I leave at the end in the appendix a number of papers in which I've been able to work sometimes with people at the agency, sometimes with academicians, to examine some of the issues, some of the controversies, some of the unintended effects, and the mitigation that can be done to make evaluation robust, reliable, and transparent, as universities and public research organizations deserve. Thank you.
Je passe la parole à Peter.
Yeah, it's there. Okay. Thanks for the invitation to give a presentation here. I'll also do it in English because my French is far too bad to speak in French. I won't go in this talk into the details about bibliometric indicators as Andrea already has done, because that would double it. So I will place the evaluation a little bit more in a context, in the larger context of the research system in which evaluation takes place, because I also think that, and that relates to the discussion after Andrea's talk, I do not think that the ranking of the universities is so important if you look at a research system or at a science system, but the performance of the science system as a whole. And within a science system, there are always universities that rank higher and others that rank lower, because that is simply the nature of rankings. Okay, now let me... Yes. Okay, so I will very briefly go into the discussion of bibliometric indicators, briefly because Andrea already did so, but I'll focus here on the discussion about the perverse effects of the use of bibliometric indicators, which is in the community quite strong and also leads in many places to people arguing to avoid the use of bibliometric indicators. Then I'll go into the issue of efficient research system and the role evaluation has in those systems. Because systems are differently organized, it's important to understand why some systems work better than others and how evaluation plays a role in the more efficient systems compared to those systems that are less efficient. Then I very briefly go into the Dutch experience. We have a national research evaluation system since the mid-1980s. I'll tell you a little bit about how it works and what we think is the effect of it. And then I'll go into mission orientation, the third mission, also Andrea already mentioned, because this has become more and more important, also in evaluations, and that also may influence academic performance of systems. And then I'll formulate some conclusions. Okay, the debate about bibliometric indicators is of course about reliability and validity of the indicators, but very strongly about the perverse effects, about playing the indicators, and that may make them useless. Andrea already mentioned the citation clubs, so I use actually this example in my next slide, and then I'll go briefly into the Australian experience. So citation clubs are people who agree with each other to cite each other's work in order to improve their scores. And in Italy, just last week I think there was published a paper that shows that the inward orientation of Italian citation patterns has increased considerably. That means that the number of the share of references in papers that have only Italian authors has increased strongly, and the claim is then that there are citation clubs. So this is the evidence. So on top you see the US. Of course, this is very much size dependent. So you see in the middle the large European countries, and then on the bottom are the small European countries. Of course, the relation between inward and outward orientation is different depending on the size of the country, because the more people are in your country, the more you can cite internally. And what we see here is Italy, the red line, that everywhere it grows, but it grows especially strong in Italy. Now the question is this now convincing proof of playing the indicators? There's a little bit discussion about the timing, because the increase starts actually before the relevance of citations became so prominent as it has become more recently. And this, as Andrea already said, can be detected by looking to citation networks. But the main question, of course, is whether this also affects the national performance. In Italy, the performance in terms of top-cited publications has increased considerably over the years. And I doubt that this can be explained by small-scale citation clubs, if they exist, because, of course, the amount of top-cited papers does not depend on Italian citations, but on worldwide citations. Okay, I'll skip this one because of the time. There's also the big issue. This is a long-standing debate in the bibliometric field about whether indicators have perverse effects at the systems level. And the main study on this is about Australia, where in the, as you see here, the publications and top-cited papers in Australia were in strong decline in the 1980s, and then the government wanted to do something against this, and so funding was then, they planned to make funding partly dependent on the number of internationally authored, internationally published papers, so in English, in Web of Science indexed journals. And then there was a famous study by Linda Butler in 2003, where she showed that although the number of international papers went strongly up after the announcement of the new policy, the funding policy, in fact the impact of the publications went down. and this would typically be a perverse effect of the use of bibliometric indicators. You use numbers of publications, people adapt to that, start to publish more, but the quality is less. Now, recently we did a replication of the study. Data are better now, so I wouldn't say that Butler's study was in fact not done correctly, but if you use better data and then you see a completely different pattern, because here we not only see the gray lines of the publication going up, but also the top 10% highly cited papers. Okay, why do we use this indicator? Because the idea behind it is that only important highly cited papers make a difference in the science system, and all the rest, of course, is there, but not very relevant in assessing the quality of the system. The 10%, then you can debate whether that should be 5 or 1% or something else, but that's a different discussion. So, in fact, what we see here is that the use of bibliometric indicators, in this case, in numbers of publications, worked quite well for the Australian system, as not only it became more productive, but also producing higher quality papers. Okay, then I go to my second point, which is the role of evaluation in efficient research system. What we did is a comparative study where we compare developed science countries with each other in terms of their efficiency, and efficiency is here then defined again, defined in terms of the increase of output divided by the increase of input, and output here is again the top 10% highly cited papers at a country level, and for the input we use funding. Why do we do the increase and not the absolute levels? That's because counting of inputs is very different between countries, and so you cannot really compare levels of funding, but what you can compare is change of funding over time. Now, what does the literature say here? And these things, if I understood well, also there's a little bit yesterday in the when it comes to autonomy. So the literature then tells us that we need to have a lot of competitive funding, mainly project funding, because that improves the quality. Then you can select the best proposals for funding, and that may result probably also in better output and so on, in a more efficient system. And institutions should be autonomous, meaning that they get the freedom to define their own strategy, and that helps them to react more strongly on to changing funding opportunities and so on. Now, if you look at the data, what we try to do here, and I give you two elements from it, is that it actually seems to work differently. So the left picture shows you the efficiency, which is on the y-axis here. We developed an indicator for that. I don't go into details. By the amount of competitive funding, so the percentage of project funding, the share of project funding in total funding for research at the country level. What I did do here is splitting the countries into two groups, those without a national research evaluation system, which are the red dots, and those with a national research evaluation system, sometimes with funding effects and sometimes without funding effects, and that are the green and the blue buttons. And what we see here is, in fact, that with the increase of the share of competitive funding, the efficiency of the system goes down. Then in the right figure, there's another analysis we did which relates to autonomy. So here we see the level of autonomy. These are based on surveys done by, I think, the European University Association. So we use the scores for autonomy at a country level they produced, and we again relate that to the on the y-axis to the efficiency. And again, here we see, in fact, the decline of efficiency with an increase of autonomy. Okay, so what does this suggest? These data suggest actually that, maybe it's important to say, so what we also see in the left one is that the countries with a national research evaluation system score considerably higher in terms of efficiency than those countries that don't have a national research evaluation system. That's what you see in the comparing the blue and the red regression line. Okay, so what do we conclude from this? There should not be too much competitive funding. We could go in a discussion why that is the case, and there should also not be too much autonomy. And there should be a national ex post evaluation system. Now, the autonomy issue and the competitive funding issue, in fact, are a way of ex ante selection and evaluation. So you evaluate proposals for research before the research is done, whereas in national research evaluation systems, you look back and you evaluate what came out of the work done by researchers and by research institutions. So the lesson here is actually that a well-functioning system should be based strongly on an ex post evaluation system and not so much on decision-making and selection ex ante. Okay, then briefly about the Netherlands national evaluation system. It's there since the mid-1980s for the medical field, and then the late 1980s it was implemented for the whole public research system. So all universities and public research institutions are obliged to have once every 6 years an evaluation of all their research programs, which generally means the research done at a department level. But big departments may have 2 or 3 research programs, which then are all separately evaluated. The universities do this, so there is not a central agency that organizes it, but they have to follow what is called the SEP, the Standard Evaluation Protocol, which tells the institutions how to do the evaluation. Evaluation is of output. Output, impact, societal impact and sustainability of the research programs. It's based on a self-evaluation in which bibliometric data always play a big role, although that universities don't need to do this, or the evaluated programs do not need to do it, but in fact everybody always does this. So this is a main part of the self-evaluation, and that's then the input for an international evaluation committee who then does the qualitative analysis. It has no real funding impact, but my theory is that it created over the decades a very competitive culture. You don't want to end up in the evaluation system low. You want to have high scores. It's part of the habit of all groups of all these programs and of staff members to produce these evaluation reports every 6 years and then in between a midterm. And it simply created this competitive culture. And as a consequence, a high level of output and impact. And here I did put that on the screen. So you see orange, the orange dotted line, that is the Netherlands. What we see there, this is over the 2000-2010 period. You see a slight increase, but at a high level of the share of top-cited papers among the total output. So you would expect that 10%, but the Netherlands is there about 14% of the output is part of the top 10 highly cited papers. Okay, then very briefly on mission orientation. So always was the report on societal impact an element. It has become more and more important. But here what we also have seen is actually an active governmental policy to make the mission orientation stronger, and in the first decade of the century, the government had selected several fields, which were the focal fields, and the idea is that they had to be stimulated and should grow considerably over the period. But what we in fact see is that that did not take place. We see here that the black line is 2000 and the red line is 2008. And what we see here, that's actually over that period, the share of these focal fields decreased actually as part of the national research output. So the focal field lost compared to the other fields in the system. Why is this the case? We have a very complex funding system in the Netherlands. in which obviously the researcher-driven model remained dominant, and despite of the priorities of government, the system moved into another direction. Okay. How is it? So after they'd seen this result, a new mission orientation policy was formulated, which is even more stronger top-down, and a large amount of public funding, especially of the NWO, had to go to what they call the top sectors, which are economically defined, innovation-driven. You have to apply with consortia, and companies are in the lead. But well, whether that's the effect, but my hypothesis would be that this is actually, again, a move from ex post to ex ante steering and evaluation. And what we see is that the growth of the top-cited papers, of the level of top-cited papers in the Netherlands, the orange dotted line, about at the moment that the new policy was introduced, started to decline. This is now a discussion in the Netherlands. Some people claim that the data are wrong. Okay, so the lessons, bibliometric indicators are useful. We saw that, for example, in the Australian case, but also the role they play in the Dutch evaluation system. Ex ante policies seem counterproductive, so it's not such a good idea to evaluate plans or research proposals and base selections on that. But a strong ex post research evaluation system may be the key to improving the system, as it produces accountability, evaluation, and a competitive culture. Thanks for your attention.
Merci. Donc, Peter a couvert la question des indicateurs, mais on voit effectivement que ça peut être lié à d'autres décisions, d'autres points d'organisation. Nous allons passer à la présentation de Sue Smart.
Okay, bonjour. Thank you for the invitation to speak today. And again, I must apologize that I will speak in English because my French is not so good. What I would like to do is to give maybe a kind of slightly complementary view from the UK about how we use indicators in evaluation. Oh, okay. So just to set the... Let's get it. Go forward. Yep. To set the context, first of all, talk about the use of indicators in the Research Excellence Framework 2021, and also about the role of the Forum for Responsible Research Metrics in the UK, and how they have helped to shape the decisions that have been taken about using indicators in the REF, and then just finish up with a few key messages from our experience. So, as many of you are already aware, in the UK, we have what we call the dual support system for funding research. So basically, we've got research councils who fund competitive projects across all of the disciplines, and those are subject to ex ante evaluation, so appraisal in advance. And then we have the funding councils, which give block grants to universities, and the size of those grants is actually based on the submissions of research every 6 to 7 years, the Research Excellence Framework, which is assessed by informed peer review, and the outcomes of that are presented as profiles. So rather than a single ranking or a single score, they actually are given as quality profiles. And just to put this in context, sorry for the quality of this, but it just gives a sense of the amount of money, the amount of funding that is actually dependent on the ref. So you can see there the largest block is the money, the block grants from Research England going to, so this is just for English universities, but you would have equivalent amounts for Scottish and Welsh and so on as well. But it's over somewhere between 2 and 2.5 billion pounds per year. So it's a lot of money, which is why people take the ref very seriously. So what is the ref? And again, many of you are already aware of the purposes. So it's mainly threefold. Mainly it's accountability, obviously a lot of money going into research, into universities, and the taxpayers need to know what's coming out as a result. The universities themselves actually value the benchmarking opportunities offered by the ref. And you very often see on university websites, they will actually refer to their kind of 4-star rankings or whatever in the ref. So they see that as a very useful benchmarking opportunity. And then most importantly, I think, is the informing the selective allocation of funding. And to be honest, that's the primary reason why people take it so seriously. The ref, again, as many of you already know, it's a process of expert review. So there are 4 main panels and 34 disciplinary sub-panels under those. The expert panels are all made up of a range of academics, international members and research users. And there are 3 main elements of assessment in the ref. So the quality of outputs, so those are publications or other types of research outputs, and they count towards 60% of the final profile allocation. The impact of those, so if you like, this is looking at the kind of the third stream activities, and that's based on case studies. This has just been nudged up very slightly to 25% of the total this time round, and then the environment, the research environment within the universities that actually is created to support and enhance both the research and knowledge transfer, and that counts towards 15% of the final profile. So how are indicators used? Well, bibliometrics were used for the first time in the REF 2014, and they will be used again this time, but very much as an input to the expert panels. So there is no conclusions drawn from the indicator, from the bibliometrics on their own. They are just used as additional evidence, if you like, by the panels. And it is up to the panels themselves to decide whether they want to use bibliometrics or not. So in REF 2021, there are 11 of the sub-panels who have said yes, we're happy to use them. And as you can see, they're mainly focused around STEM subjects, so medical, life sciences, physical sciences, but also economics panel have said that they will. The data being provided to the panels will be the same for in all cases, and it's being provided this time. It's being provided by Clarivate Analytics. Last time I think it was from Scopus. And it is very, very simple. It's very straightforward. So it is just the citation count of each of the individual outputs, I should say, that have been provided to the panel, so the publication or whatever. And then contextual data, which allows the panel members to actually benchmark each publication against the publications in the journal categories for which that publication is relevant. And this time round, they're also categorising by the type of publication, so whether it's an article or a review or a proceeding, so that the panels also can see the percentile citation counts for the relevant publication type. Because it was felt that last time that could be, where you had small numbers, it could be confusing. So where a journal belongs to several different subject categories, it is up to the judgment of the panel members to decide which are the most appropriate categories to use for that particular publication as well, so that they can judge it accordingly. However, as I said before, this is very much subservient to the peer review process. And in fact, I believe that at the moment the plan is to provide the citation data to panel members after they have done the initial assessment of the individual publication. So if you like, it will be more of a kind of a validation stage. So that it doesn't actually affect their view of the individual publications. So we take quite a cautious approach to using bibliometrics. The other area where we use indicators is in the assessment of the environment of the research departments, and here. The standard data that is being provided from the universities is the number of doctoral degrees, so PhDs by year, something about the external research income, both by source, and that's both cash income and also research income by kind, so use of facilities and so on will it be included within that. And in addition to those that standard data set, as part of the narrative, which is to provide a kind of an explanation of how the university structures its environment in order to support research. The universities are encouraged to draw on a number of indicators that they can include within the narrative to provide evidence. And those indicators have actually been developed by the Forum for Responsible Research Metrics. So if I just, there we are. So the Forum for Responsible Research Metrics, this body was established in 2016, and it came out of the Willesden Review of Metrics, called The Rising Tide. And some of you may be aware that there was quite a lot of pressure prior to that in the UK to try and come up with a more kind of metrics-based system for evaluating universities. And there was a lot of pushback against that. The universities all said that, you know, there is a place for indicators, but the REF needs to remain primarily as a peer review system, and fortunately that's what happened. But as part of the kind of review of, well, how can we use indicators, we had the metric tide. And coming out of that, we had the creation of this, the Forum for Responsible Research Metrics, which is the kind of, if you like, the primary focus now in the UK for discussing and agreeing the use of metrics and indicators in evaluation. So the forum includes research funders, managers from universities, and it's actually chaired by a senior academic. The role of the forum is to provide advice across the community, specifically on the REF 2021, but also in terms of what data infrastructure is needed for indicators, and to provide advocacy and leadership as well on the use of research metrics. And the advice from the forum was that, first of all, key points, panels should choose whether to adopt indicators. The data from the same source should be used for consistency. Citation counts for each article should be benchmarked against averages and percentiles. They explicitly ruled out the use of metrics such as journal impact factors and the H index in this context, because it's not it isn't equitable across the patch. And they suggested that the use of bibliometrics might be useful as a tool for comparison. So, for example, if there was an area when they looked at the kind of results that you get from the bibliometrics, it might highlight areas that maybe that hadn't come out so strongly in the peer review assessments, and would be a chance to sort of just to check those and to validate the assessments. The forum also came up with a set of principles for the use of indicators in the environment part of the ref. I'm not going to go through all of these in detail, but you'll see that there's a lot of correlation with the Leiden Manifesto and other sets of principles that have come out, and it's very much about using them within context and ensuring that they are appropriately interpreted. So that's just given you an overview of how the indicators are going to be used in REF 2021. Just to finish up with a few key messages. As I've said, I think there is a role for indicators in the evaluation of research units and universities, but certainly in the UK it's used as an input to peer review, not as a replacement. And indicators need to be carefully contextualised. To help in considering which indicators to use, it's helpful to have a set of principles that you can refer to. And I think one of the interesting things about the indicators that have been suggested for REF 2021 is the list of indicators which were rejected on the basis that they were not consistent with the principles set out by the forum. So if you look at the report of the forum on the web, there were about 125 indicators which were considered but which were rejected. There were about 25 to 30 that were actually considered to be possibly appropriate to be used by universities. And I think that's quite an important point, is that there are an awful lot of indicators out there, but they're not all, it doesn't mean that you want to use them all in every situation. And finally, consider carefully any unintended consequences. And as always, the development and the use of indicators needs to be done in discussion with those who are going to be using them to avoid unintended consequences. And I will stop there. Thank you.
Merci. Je vais passer la parole à Sophie Cluet pour la dernière intervention de notre table.
Rester assise, si ça ne vous dérange pas. Donc moi, je vais intervenir plutôt sur le petit bout de la lorgnette. On a vu un peu l'évaluation des universités dans le système de recherche des différents pays. Moi, j'ai plutôt regardé, donc l'évaluation, ça peut être pour positionner un acteur, quelque chose dans un système. C'est aussi un outil pour piloter un établissement, vérifier, enfin mesurer l'impact des politiques qu'on peut mettre en place au niveau d'un établissement. Donc, je vais plutôt aborder cette question que l'autre question qui a été déjà très largement abordée par mes prédécesseurs. Donc, ce n'est pas tout à fait la même granularité, hein. Piloter au niveau d'un établissement, s'assurer que les actions qu'on met en place ont un impact, qu'elles sont bonnes, voire éventuellement les faire évoluer. C'est une granularité beaucoup plus fine que la granularité d'évaluation des établissements. Et la temporalité n'est pas la même non plus. Tout à l'heure, on a parlé on a parlé essentiellement de bibliométrie. La bibliométrie, on peut voir un impact sur une politique 4, 5, 6 ans après cette politique. Je veux dire, le temps de la publication, enfin de la recherche, de la publication, de la citation, tout ça prend du temps. Donc le pas de temps n'est pas parfaitement adapté au pilotage d'un établissement. Après, j'ai essayé de regarder quelles étaient les choses qu'on voulait pouvoir évaluer, enfin qu'on évalue au sein d'un établissement. Alors, bien sûr, il y a la qualité des recherches. On en a déjà beaucoup parlé, donc je ne vais pas reparler de bibliométrie. Je voudrais quand même signaler qu'en France, on a une petite difficulté, c'est la mixité et les multi-adresses. Donc ça oblige tous les ans, avec l'étude IPRU, à revoir un peu tous les papiers qu'on reçoit pour pouvoir s'assurer que tous nos auteurs ont bien été adressés comme il faut, avec tous les problèmes que l'on sait. Et comme je l'évoquais, c'est un bon outil de positionnement, mais ce n'est pas vraiment un outil de pilotage. Alors après, il y a d'autres outils. On peut regarder peut-être les réponses aux appels à projets. Je pense à l'ANR, mais l'Europe ou d'autres appels à projets. Alors là, la difficulté, c'est que par rapport à la qualité des recherches, on mesure en fait aussi beaucoup les services de soutien aux laboratoires. Je ne dis pas qu'une mauvaise recherche peut obtenir beaucoup de projets, mais bon, une recherche moyenne peut obtenir plus de projets qu'une très bonne recherche si derrière il n'y a pas des soutiens aux chercheurs pour rédiger les appels les réponses aux appels telles qu'on les attend. Et puis également, on revoit encore la problématique de la mixité. On a beaucoup de mal au sein d'un établissement à savoir, à connaître les taux de réponse, puisque les dossiers sont déposés par différents établissements au sein d'un même laboratoire. Ensuite, il y a une autre chose qu'on va vouloir évaluer, ça va être la réponse à des priorités que se donne l'établissement, ou que se donne d'ailleurs, ou que l'État donne. Donc un peu la réponse à des grands défis de société, des grands enjeux. Donc à Sorbonne Université, par exemple, on a créé des instituts pour répondre à des enjeux de société. Et donc, voilà, quel impact ont ces instituts sur les recherches de l'université? Alors là, ce n'est pas très facile à mesurer immédiatement. On a déjà évoqué le sujet avec l'OST. En général, c'est des enjeux pluridisciplinaires, donc il faut être capable de faire des études pluridisciplinaires de bibliométrie. Voilà, l'OST s'y penche. Et puis après, il y a d'autres moyens. De nouveau, on peut regarder les réponses aux appels à projets avec les défauts que j'ai déjà évoqués. Autre chose qu'on va vouloir mesurer, c'est l'ouverture à l'international ou à l'Europe. Alors là, il y a des mesures de copublication sur les partenariats ciblés, les partenariats stratégiques de l'établissement. Ou alors, on peut regarder aussi les mobilités entrantes et sortantes de façon générale, ou vers des partenaires ciblés. Pour les copublications avec sur les partenariats, là, on a un petit problème, c'est le problème des moyens. En fait, pour mesurer ça, ça nécessite des études assez fines, ciblées. Donc, soit on a un bibliomètre à la maison qui va nous permettre de le faire, soit il va falloir commander une prestation. Et après, c'est toujours pareil. Problème de moyens, il y a assez peu d'universités qui ont des bibliomètres. Et quand on en a, on a du mal à les garder, à vrai dire. Mobilité entrante et sortante. Bon, là, la difficulté, alors là, ça ne va pas être au sein d'un établissement, mais je dirais pour faire une comparaison entre établissements. Là, je pense à l'Hcéres, par exemple, si c'est quelque chose que vous voulez mesurer. C'est qu'on n'a pas tous la même façon de mesurer et d'établir cette mesure. Il n'y a pas de standard. Et donc, on peut en faire un peu un outil de com'. Ou alors, on peut essayer d'être... je veux dire, en interne, on peut faire les choses proprement, et en externe, on peut le faire de façon plus floue. Autre sujet qui va nous intéresser, l'ouverture à l'entreprise. Alors là, il y a les biblios avec les entreprises. Je crois que Leiden utilise ça. Il y a un classement spécifique sur les collaborations avec les entreprises. Il y a l'analyse des brevets. Mais si on reste sur les copropriétaires, on a les difficultés qu'on connaît qui sont vraiment inhérentes à notre système. Il faudrait pouvoir descendre plus finement au niveau des inventeurs, avec les problèmes d'homonymie, avec les problèmes de mobilité aussi. Est-ce que l'inventeur, il a inventé quand il était là ou quand il était là? Donc je sais que l'OST s'y penche, on attend avec impatience de faire partie du pilote. Voilà. Et puis par ailleurs, les brevets, ça donne une mesure, mais on a beaucoup de brevets qui sont inutiles. Évidemment. Et puis il y a par ailleurs beaucoup de transferts qui se feraient sans brevet. Donc il faut regarder aussi ce qu'on veut mesurer en matière de transfert. justement, on pourrait regarder la création d'entreprises ou les mobilités ou le travail avec les entreprises. Mais là, de nouveau, il n'y a pas de standard. Chacun mesure comme il veut. On peut annoncer, le nombre de créations d'entreprises dans une université. Ça dépend. Est-ce qu'on va compter les alumni? Au bout de combien de temps on dit que les gens ils sont encore chez nous? Voilà, donc on peut passer du simple au triple, voire on peut multiplier par 10. Dernier point, l'ouverture à la société. Donc, on n'a pas vraiment de solution. Là, c'est pareil, c'est un peu un compte individuel. Chaque université va avoir un service plus ou moins dédié qui va regarder ce qu'elle peut récupérer. Donc, il y a les interventions dans les médias. Donc, sauf à faire du data mining, on a quand même des difficultés. Puis, il y a aussi toujours la problématique des UMR. Et après, de la façon dont les gens vont se présenter. Des fois, ils se présentent sur l'université, d'autres fois le nom du laboratoire ou le nom de la fondation de coopération scientifique qui a été créée récemment. Enfin bon, bref. Il y a des actions de sciences participatives. Il y a aussi toutes les actions de vulgarisation, d'ouvrages de vulgarisation. On est un peu démunis, pareil, pas de standard, chacun fait comme il peut. Et puis, il y a également, ça a été abordé d'ailleurs, je crois, par sous les plateformes technologiques, leurs utilisations, les utilisateurs de ces plateformes. Et là, c'est pareil, on n'a pas de statistiques globales, donc chacun, de nouveau, fait un peu comme il peut, comme il veut, et il n'y a pas de comparaison possible, à mon sens, entre les différents établissements. Il y a une autre question qui m'intéresse beaucoup, c'est les ressources humaines, mais comme je l'ai dit, les établissements ont finalement assez peu d'autonomie en matière de RH, donc ce n'est pas quelque chose qu'on regarde de très près pour les raisons que l'on sait. En conclusion, donc la bibliométrie c'est indispensable, c'est un très bon outil, mais bon, pour beaucoup de sujets ça reste trop macro. Passer au niveau plus micro demande des moyens, des fois c'est pas toujours possible. Le temps est long, ça a déjà été évoqué, je crois dans la première présentation, c'est pas non plus un outil très adapté aux sciences humaines et sociales. Mais en France, en fait, le problème principal, que ce soit pour la biblio ou pour les autres indicateurs, ça reste quand même la mixité des laboratoires et donc la difficulté à mesurer. En fait, si on sommait tout ce que les établissements déclarent, je pense qu'on arriverait à 5 fois la production réelle des laboratoires, ce qui est un peu aberrant. Et puis, ce que j'ai évoqué à plusieurs reprises, c'est le manque de standards, de mesures standards sur beaucoup de domaines, de définition de ce que c'est que la mobilité, ce que c'est que la création d'entreprise, ce que c'est que le transfert. Et voilà, donc j'invite la Hcéres peut-être à se pencher sur cette question, pour voir comment on pourrait comme ça être amené à comparer, avoir une mesure un peu... Ouais. On peut bien participer à des pilotes, si vous voulez. Voilà, j'ai fini.
Merci beaucoup. Donc effectivement, à travers le point de vue d'une université, on voit à la fois que ces indicateurs, ils peuvent avoir un rôle de pilotage, un rôle donc après dans les dossiers d'auto-évaluation, mais donc ils peuvent être bifaces, mais on retrouve le point que je mentionnais au début, quand on sort effectivement de la bibliométrie, de tous les outils de normalisation qu'on peut utiliser dans ce cadre-là, on a d'importants problèmes de sources et d'harmonisation des données. Bon, maintenant, tout ça peut progresser. Je pense que l'exemple du Royaume-Uni avec le forum qui a été détaillé, justement, à regarder d'autres types de données, et donc il peut y avoir une progression. Je vais ouvrir une brève période d'échange entre nos contributeurs. Si l'un d'entre vous souhaitait réagir sur les présentations des autres, avant de repartir sur une série de questions. Est-ce que l'un d'entre vous souhaitait interagir avec
Oui, peut-être.
Andrea? Oui, brièvement.
Le sujet, hein?
Oui.
Alors, comment sur la question de l'ouverture à la société, aux entreprises, à Madame Cluet, our experience has been in the field of third mission. Interesting in the effort to define indicators that have multiple levels, in individual and organizational, university level. Okay, for example, for patents, there is a clear distinction between academic patents, that is invented by researchers, and university patents, that is the brevet, the patents that have been taken on board by the university as the institutional level, paying the fee for the patent office and giving to the transfer office, the technology transfer office for economic valorization. They are quite different sets. And we carried out an extensive data collection, going down to individual, asking researchers to validate their patents, and studying the relation between individual academic patents and the ones that are the responsibility of the university. And this is very interesting because you see a lot of stuff.
I'm not sure I understand, because in France, a patent cannot be filed by a researcher, public researchers. It has to be filed by its employer. Unless he did it before or a long time after.
Have you ever checked this?
Well, actually, we do. That's what I was telling Frédérique recently, because sometimes they don't file by themselves. Sometimes we find patents that are filed by a company with an inventor that is an employee of the university. So we don't know all of them, obviously. That's why we are very curious about the work of the OST on this topic. But sometimes we find, because at some point the company is making money, and the researcher realizes that he's not getting any money from the company. So then he comes to the university, says, wow, this company, they are cheating me because they have this patent that belongs to the university. Thank you, we didn't know about it. And then we fight for the researcher in order to get the money back. But then they get, there is a law in France that says that half of the revenue of the patent goes to the inventors. Okay. So that's also a good thing for them to give us the patent. Yeah. They know that they will get half of the money if it is transferred.
Okay, that's all.
Ça illustre effectivement un effort particulier qui a été fait en Italie pour recenser avec la validation. L'intérêt du système italien, c'est d'avoir fait cette validation par les chercheurs. Donc ça facilite, puisqu'on a toutes ces questions de désambiguation des noms.
Je trouve fantastique ce que vous faites. Non mais sérieusement, parce que j'étais absolument enthousiasmée par la première partie sur justement l'évaluation des chercheurs. C'est incroyable le travail qui est fait. Alors après, je comprends bien les problèmes de confidentialité, mais c'est dommage qu'on ne puisse pas en profiter, que les établissements ne peuvent pas en profiter à des niveaux. Mais c'est...
Does this work? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I want to go into one issue that was most explicitly raised in the UK example, which is when people talk about indicators, it's always indicators versus peer review. Now, let me give very quickly an opposite perspective on that. So I would say that the advantage of indicators is that you can, you know how they are defined, you can investigate whether they work or whether they are wrong, and even you can investigate their unintended consequences. There's a lot of talking about it, but hardly evidence that these unintended consequences also really exist. But on the other hand, we know from a lot of research that peer review is actually, to say it briefly, unreliable. So there is a lot of social processes going on in teams, in committees with peers. The social dynamics in the team creates a lot of, I would say, unreliability. But also there is a systematic problem with peer review, is that peer reviewers assess reputation of researchers or of labs and not recent performance. We did a small experiment with a Swedish university where the bibliometric information was on the table in a university-wide interdisciplinary peer review team to evaluate the research for the whole university. And so for every field there was somebody in the committee. And these specialists for that field always overestimated the performance of the groups they were they specifically looked at, because they took with them the reputation of old work, sometimes decades before the period the panel has to evaluate. And then the bibliometric information disciplines the discussion. So if, according to the bibliometric indicators, the performance was low, somebody cannot say, well, this is a very good team, they have made many breakthroughs in science, because then it becomes very quickly obvious that the reviewers are talking about decades ago and not about the last 5 or 6 years. So I would strongly recommend not to give the bibliometric data afterwards for validation, but to give them at the start of the process to discipline the peers to don't talk nonsense.
Okay, I'll come back on that. Yeah, so I mean, I think actually the point is that both indicators and peer review can be equally powerful, but it's the way in which they are implemented which is the important thing. So, for example, with the peer review panels in the REF, they are not being asked to just give their judgment on groups per se. They are being asked to assess a set of outputs which are presented to them, and the outputs are not they're not actually linked to specific individuals. So this time round, a university will provide a set of outputs which is representative of quite a large group of people. So I think you can run peer review in such a way that you can take out some of those biases. But I agree then that also you need to have the indicators to actually help to, if you like, to validate and to challenge where it may look as though people are using their, the sort of their own biases in the system.
No, I have a question because unless I misunderstand again your graphic about efficiency and autonomy, how do you react to this low efficiency apparently of the English system?
So
how do you react?
I mean, I was interested in that, and I'm afraid that I think that my gut reaction is I don't believe it.
Actually, I have difficulty believing it.
Because I think, it must be something to do with the funding figures maybe that are being used. So I doubt the data.
You too.
I think je pense qu'une des choses importantes, c'est que l'étude résonne en accroissement. Résonne en accroissement. Et c'est pas le niveau de la recherche britannique, c'est l'accroissement des fonds versus l'accroissement de l'output. Mais je laisse...
Yeah, so I'm not saying that the British system has not highly ranked universities or doesn't have, on the systems level, probably a lot of top-cited papers. However, the increase of money is not translated into a similar increase of high-level output, if you look at the decade we studied. And my explanation for that would be that, in fact, the UK system is, although everybody thinks it's competition-driven because of the competition for the block funding through the REF and competition and a high share of the money go through the councils. In fact, the system is reputation-driven. And so those people with a big reputation keep the big reputation, also get the rewards from that. And that is also what we know from research related to peer review. If you take a similar proposal and you put on top of it a name doesn't need to be a famous person, but the name and Oxford University, or you put the same proposal with another, with the name, and then behind it the former Polytechnic, so the University of Brighton, then of course the Oxford, the same thing is assessed by peers higher when it comes from Oxford than when it comes from Brighton. And this is the big problem.
I would argue, I mean, that will be sometimes, but I've also seen, I have seen Nobel laureates having their applications turned down, and it is very, very difficult to tell them that they're not getting funded. So that I think it's there are balances in there.
Short comment. I also share criticism on the efficiency measure of Peter. I wouldn't label efficiency, because efficiency is a multi-input, multi-output kind of measure.
Yeah.
On one hand. On the other hand, if I read the data on the other side, Spain or Italy, you move from a low level and you improve, so the marginal increase that you may have is different for UK, which is also at the top level. And
We checked for that. We checked for that.
Yeah, but and they are in a period in which the budget actually was cut in relative terms. So in a sense, it's difficult to give an interpretation about the relative impact of funding in Spain and Italy, which had large cuts over that periods. So in a sense, it's a system that survives and improves performance in an environment which is deprived from funding. So it's very difficult to give out, to generalize from this situation. So I also share some concern about the general message.
Merci.